They tamed wild beasts for applause. But when the curtain fell, some never came back out. These are the terrifying last moments of trainers whose lives ended in the ring. Number 8. Alexander Crispin. The crowd had come for excitement, but what unfolded inside the circus tent that June night in 2013 left them running for their lives. In the small town of Suarez, Mexico, 35-year-old animal trainer Alexander Crispin stepped confidently into the ring. He had rehearsed this act countless times, and the audience waited to see him guide 2 Bengal tigers through their routine. Crispin, an American working with the Hermanos Suarez Circus, knew the animals well. At least, he thought he did. The show began as expected. Crispin jogged in circles, urging the massive cats to follow his movements and spin for the spectators. The crowd clapped, entertained by the display of control over such powerful predators. But then, without warning, the act collapsed. One tiger suddenly stopped, and in that instant, the balance of power inside the ring shifted. The tiger lunged, wrapping its powerful paws around Crispin's legs, and knocked him down. The crowd's excitement collapsed into panic. Shouts and screams filled the tent as the tiger pinned its trainer. Video footage showed people scrambling from their seats. Meanwhile, 2 circus workers rushed forward with sticks, striking the animal in desperation as they tried to free Crispin from its crushing hold. But the animal's grip was unrelenting. The man who only seconds before had commanded the spotlight was now clinging to life. When the tiger was finally restrained, Crispin's injuries were devastating. Deep wounds covered his neck and body. He was rushed by ambulance to the Red Cross Hospital in Huatabampo, Sonora, where doctors fought to stabilize him. But the damage was too great. He died soon after, the cause identified as massive blood loss. In the aftermath, investigators from Profepa, Mexico's Environmental Protection Authority, stepped in. The agency discovered the circus lacked proper permits for its animals. As a result, officials seized not only the tiger that attacked Crispin, but another tiger, along with 2 llamas and 2 camels. The animals were transferred to the Ostimuri Ecological Center in Ciudad Obregón. Whether the tiger involved would ever return to a circus remained uncertain. Officials reminded the public that such animals were never meant to be entertainment inside a ring. On social media, reactions poured in. Some posts claimed the tiger was euthanized, though officials did not confirm this. Others voiced anger at the entire system, pointing out that the real issue was not the tiger, but the practice of confining wild animals for profit. Could anyone truly expect an apex predator, stressed and confined, to behave like a trained pet? The science of tiger behavior adds more context. In the wild, Bengal tigers rarely kill humans. Their diet usually consists of wild pigs, deer, and other prey found in their territory. When rare attacks on humans do happen in the wild, they usually stem from desperation, sickness, or when their hunting grounds have been destroyed by human expansion. There is another important fact. Tigers are territorial animals. Males will not tolerate rivals close by, marking and defending vast ranges that can stretch for miles. Forcing 2 of them into the small, confined space of a circus ring magnifies stress to unbearable levels. In those conditions, even years of training and trust can unravel in a single second. The tragedy of Alexander Crispin's death was more than a random accident. It was the clash between human ambition and raw animal instinct. When you place a predator in a cage and expect it to perform like a puppet, what happens when it decides to act like the predator it was born to be? Don Brancho and Tillicum. The surface of the pool looked calm, almost too calm for what was about to happen. Beneath it waited a predator weighing more than 12,000 pounds, the largest killer whale ever kept at SeaWorld. His name was Tillicum. He was the park's main attraction.
Tillicum is sick with a bacterial infection in his lungs.
Dawn Brancho, a senior trainer at the park, had spent years working with orcas. She was known for her patience and dedication, and the bond she formed with the whales made her a favorite among audiences. Over time, she became one of the most recognizable faces at SeaWorld Orlando. For Dawn, this work wasn't simply a job, it was her passion, and she was trusted with the park's most famous animals. Among them was Tilikum. The two shared years of performances together. Colleagues described her as gentle and firm, someone who knew how to connect with these unpredictable animals. She treated Tilikum with care, and many believed that bond kept them safe. But trust would not be enough. On February 24, 2010, Dawn stepped into what seemed like a routine show. The event was called Dining with Shamu. Guests sat down for open-air meals, while trainers worked with orcas just a few feet away. That day, hundreds were in the audience.
The family from Somersworth had bought tickets to dine with Shamu at SeaWorld for their 10-year-old son's birthday.
Dawn positioned herself on a shallow platform only inches beneath the water's surface. The plan was simple. She reclined, and Tilikum would roll onto his back to mirror her. But in a flash, something went wrong. Instead of following her lead, Tilikum lunged. Witnesses gave different accounts. Some swore he grabbed her by her ponytail. Others insisted it was her arm or her shoulder. However it began, the outcome was the same. Tilikum pulled her violently into the water. The crowd's excitement turned instantly into panic. Families who moments before were clapping and smiling now watched in shock. The orca had Dawn in his jaws. He swung her side to side with terrifying force. Screams filled the arena. Many people rushed for the exits, covering their children's eyes. SeaWorld staff did everything they could. Nets were thrown into the water. Buckets of food were used in desperate attempts to distract the orca. Commands were shouted again and again, but Tilikum refused to let go.
SeaWorld is keeping a close eye on a killer whale blamed for killing a trainer.
The attack stretched on for an unbearable 45 minutes. Eventually, the whale was moved into a smaller pool, yet even then, he kept hold of his trainer. When employees finally reached Dawn, the damage had already been done. She had not survived. The autopsy laid bare the violence of the struggle. Her jaw had been fractured. Several ribs were broken. Her spine was injured. Her elbow and knee were dislocated.
In 2010, trainer Dawn Branchow died when the whale pulled her under and she drowned.
Part of her scalp had been torn away. The sheer force of the whale's attack left no doubt about the brutality of what she endured. After the tragedy, SeaWorld faced a storm of criticism. Questions swirled about whether trainers should ever share the water with animals so large and unpredictable. In response, the park introduced new safety features. One major change was the installation of fast-rising floors that could quickly lift trainers out of the pool in an emergency. Even with changes, SeaWorld's reputation suffered. The years that followed brought layoffs of hundreds of employees, and eventually the company's CEO stepped down. The park tried to recover its image, but the shadow of that February afternoon still lingers. Dawn Branchow believed in her connection with Tilikum. She gave years of her life to caring for orcas and sharing their power with audiences. But on that day, instinct overpowered trust.
When trainer Dawn Branchow was attacked and killed by the very same killer whale she'd been working with moments before.
The largest whale at SeaWorld turned on the person who believed in him most, and it left behind a single, chilling question. How safe can it ever be to work side by side with a killer whale? Number 6. Alexis Martinez and Keto. The day began like any other rehearsal. By the end of it, a man was dead at the bottom of the pool. Crowds at Loro Parque in Tenerife often gasped when Keto, a massive male orca, leapt out of the water. He was the star of the show, a whale whose size and presence drew visitors from across the world. But by 2009, beneath the spectacle, things were beginning to shift. It was Christmas Eve. In the training pool, 29-year-old Alexis Martinez was preparing with Keto for the holiday performance. Alexis wasn't new to this work. He had trained orcas for years, building routines with precision and trust. On that day, though, the atmosphere felt different. Keto missed several cues during practice. He hovered near the surface, quiet and still. Alexis stayed with him, watching, probably trying to read what was going on. Trainers often rely on instinct in moments like these, and Alexis seemed to sense something wasn't right. But how bad could it get?
Close eye on a killer whale blamed for killing a trainer.
From the side, another staff member noticed something unusual. Quito appeared to block Alexis from reaching the platform, almost as if he wanted to keep him in the water. Then came the moment that changed everything. When Alexis gave the signal to leave, Quito shifted. At first, his movements were slow, but the pressure built quickly. Another trainer outside the pool tried the standard control signals. Normally, these cues worked. This time, Quito ignored them. He pushed Alexis down with the tip of his rostrum, forcing him underwater. The situation escalated rapidly. For a second, it looked like Quito might release him. He surfaced, took a breath, and stayed calm. Hope rose. But in the next breath, he dove again. When he came back up, Alexis was balanced on Quito's rostrum. His mouth was closed. Then, without warning, Quito released him, letting his trainer sink motionless to the bottom. Panic rippled through the team. They scrambled to isolate Quito, but he stalled near the gate as if resisting their efforts. Trainers dropped a safety net, finally coaxing him into another pool. That gave them the chance to recover Alexis. By then, it was too late. The injuries spoke volumes. Internal bleeding, torn organs, fractures, and bite marks covered Alexis's body. The post-mortem left no doubt. But why did it happen? Some experts pointed to the environment. At Loro Parque, the orcas were kept in tanks that left them restless and frustrated. There was no mature female to maintain social balance. So the whales were constantly shifting roles and competing for dominance. Life in those conditions was unpredictable. Boredom added to the strain. Trainers described how the orcas would rip at the Metflex lining of the pool, the way bored kids peel away at chipped paint. Small acts of frustration hinted at something larger. Animal welfare groups argued that Quito's very genetics played a role. They claimed he was inbred, a whale bred from the offspring of his sibling, and that confinement had pushed him into psychological collapse. The park denied those claims, but the tragedy raised questions that were hard to ignore. Orcas are built for the open ocean, for speed, for deep social bonds, for thousands of miles of movement. In a tank, those instincts twist. The pressure grows until something gives way. The death of Alexis Martinez revealed more than the dangers of working with powerful animals. It showed the cost of keeping intelligent, emotional beings in captivity for human entertainment. When their freedom is taken, their world shrinks. And sometimes, that collapse turns violent. Number 5. Stefan Miller and Rocky. At first, it looks like just another day on set. Trainers and crew are preparing for a routine promotional video, the kind of job this bear had done many times before. But what happens next shows how quickly things can go from calm to catastrophic when working with powerful wild animals. The bear's name was Rocky. He was 5 years old, weighed more than 300 kilograms, and stretched almost 2.5 meters tall when he stood on his back legs. Rocky was not just any grizzly pulled from the wild. He was famous in Hollywood, appearing in commercials and movies. Audiences even saw him in the comedy Semi-Pro, where he wrestled actor Will Ferrell in a staged ring fight. By all accounts, Rocky had been trained and handled with care, which made what happened on April 22, 2008, all the more shocking. That day, two cousins, Stefan Miller and Randy Miller, were working with Rocky at a facility in California. The plan was simple: film Rocky performing standard moves for a promotional video. Stefan had years of experience with bears, although he had stepped away from regular training at that point. His cousin Randy, who had worked closely with Rocky, called him in to help with the shoot because of his background and confidence around animals of that size. For a while, everything unfolded as expected. Rocky moved through the routine maneuvers, calm and seemingly cooperative. Then, in a matter of seconds, everything changed. Without warning, Rocky lunged at Stefan. The bear clamped his massive jaws around Stefan's neck and shook him with such force that witnesses later described it as if a rag doll had been tossed through the air. Can you imagine the panic in that moment? A crew of people suddenly trapped in a fight against a 700-pound grizzly, one of the strongest predators on Earth. Randy Miller immediately took a cane he was holding and struck Rocky, desperate to save his cousin. Other crew members rushed forward with cans of pepper spray and unloaded them on the animal. The bear recoiled and released Stefan just long enough for him to stumble out of view of the camera. But the damage had already been done. Stefan's throat wound was devastating. Even though the entire incident lasted only seconds, it was enough to seal his fate. Before paramedics could arrive, he collapsed and died from blood loss. He was only 39 years old, leaving behind a wife and 2 children. In the aftermath, people struggled with how to make sense of it. Some asked whether Rocky should be put down. Others questioned why anyone should expect a wild predator, no matter how well trained, to ever be completely safe. What made the situation even more surprising was Randy's response. Despite losing his cousin, he told investigators and reporters that Rocky had always been a loving and affectionate animal, and that he still considered him a safe bear.
For killing Stevie, I don't think he tried to kill him, so I don't blame him for that.
The California Department of Fish and Game opened a full investigation. After reviewing the case, they ruled the tragedy an accident. Rocky was not euthanized. However, his freedom was over. He was sent to live out the rest of his days under strict restrictions. The story of Rocky and Stefan shows how quickly trust between humans and animals can collapse when instinct takes over. No matter how carefully a creature has been trained, the wild inside never truly disappears. Number 4. Ali Khan Samsudin. Some people dedicate their lives to music, others to sport. But Ali Khan Samsudin chose a path that most would never dare to even imagine. He became famous not for running from danger, but for walking directly into it. In Malaysia, during the early 1990s, his name began to spread. Crowds gathered not only to watch, but to hold their breath as he attempted challenges that seemed impossible. One of his most talked-about feats was when he shut himself inside a cramped room with 400 cobras. Not for a few hours, not even a few days, but for 40 consecutive days. Each day he spent 12 hours surrounded by venomous reptiles that could kill with a single strike. People came to see if he would survive, and to their astonishment, he did. That extraordinary test of endurance earned him the title of Snake King. But the snakes were only part of the story. He wanted something even more extreme. Not long after, Samsudin stepped into another enclosure, this one crawling with 6,000 scorpions. He remained inside for 3 weeks. Day after day, night after night, the creatures climbed over him, their tails striking again and again. He was stung 99 times during the ordeal, each sting adding to the swelling and pain. Yet, he endured it, leaving the box after weeks of suffering with his second title, the Scorpion King. Watching him, many wondered what kind of person could willingly endure that level of risk. Was it bravery, obsession, or something else entirely? Ali Khan Samsudin seemed to thrive in the spotlight of danger. The thrill of showing the world that he could stand among creatures that others feared gave him recognition across Asia. But even he admitted through his actions that the dangers were real. Every encounter with a cobra or a scorpion came with the possibility of death. And how many close calls can one person survive before luck runs out? The answer came in 2006. During a performance, a cobra struck him. Those who knew him well said he did not panic. According to his son, Amjad Khan, it was not the first time he had been bitten, and he expected to recover as he always had before. But this time was different. Over the next few days, his condition worsened. What began as another occupational hazard slowly turned into a fight he could not win. He was rushed to Kuala Lumpur Hospital, and there, doctors tried to save him. After 3 days, however, the venom claimed his life. He was only 48 years old. It is striking to think about the contrast. For decades, Ali Khan Samsudin seemed invincible. He had survived challenges that would kill most within minutes. He had spent his life inside rooms full of cobras, boxes filled with thousands of scorpions, and he had kissed snakes on the head as if they were harmless pets. Yet, in the end, it was a single bite during a routine performance that ended it all. Number 3. Tyke's rampage. On August 20th, 1994, Honolulu witnessed an event so violent that many still struggle to talk about it.
On a more serious note, we now go to Honolulu, Hawaii. A 4-ton African elephant is trampling his trainer under the big top.
The elephant at the center of it all was Tyke, a massive African bush elephant who had spent nearly every day of her life in captivity. She had been taken from Mozambique as a baby in 1973 and shipped overseas. Not long after, she was sold to the Hawthorne Corporation, a business that supplied animals to traveling shows. By the time she reached Hawaii to perform with Circus International of Honolulu, she had already lived through decades of chains, long hours of confinement, and the harshness of the training ring. Tyke was used to handlers shouting, striking, and demanding obedience. In fact, former accounts later revealed that she had been kept in chains for nearly 22 hours a day. Her freedom came only during performances or grueling training sessions. The trainer who worked her most closely, Alan Campbell, was often described as a punishment-driven handler. Reports claimed he worked elephants until exhaustion.
I saw that and I was reading it. I had to read this elephant. I had to rediscover everything about this elephant because no one told me anything about her.
And complaints of abusive treatment followed him from show to show. It was in this world that Tyke grew more agitated with time. The public only saw her as part of the act, but behind the curtain, Tyke had already shown warning signs. She had tried to break free on 3 different occasions before the Honolulu disaster. In Pennsylvania, in North Dakota, and even in Canada, she had escaped her handlers, injuring people and causing serious damage. Those incidents, however, were brushed aside by the circus industry, and Tyke was kept on the same punishing schedule. So when she stepped into the Blaisdell Center Arena that August night, she carried decades of frustration and suffering with her. The act began as usual, but something was off. Her groomer, Dallas Beckwith, suddenly found himself under attack. Tyke kicked and thrashed at him with terrifying force. She tossed him around like he weighed nothing. At first, the audience thought it was part of the show, but the horror quickly became clear. Alan Campbell rushed forward, attempting to bring her under control. Instead, Tyke turned on him. In a matter of moments, Campbell was struck down, dragged, and crushed to death under the weight of her trunk. Panic spread quickly. Families rushed for the exits as Tyke stormed out of the arena. She charged into the parking lot, where a publicist tried to block her escape and was injured in the process. Police officers were already nearby. One officer fired warning shots to try to distract her, sending the 8,000-pound animal charging down the streets of Honolulu. For half an hour, police and bystanders watched in shock as officers tried to corner Tyke. Some wanted to tranquilize her, but that option quickly faded as she continued rampaging. Eventually, officers opened fire. Reports later stated that between 86 and 87 bullets tore into Tyke's body. The massive animal staggered, collapsed, and finally bled to death in the street. The aftermath raised questions that still hang over the circus industry. Many began asking difficult questions. How many warnings had there been before that night? Could Tyke's violent outburst have been prevented if her life in captivity had been different? And what does it say about humans' relationship with animals that a creature like her was pushed to such a breaking point? The Honolulu incident did more than end the lives of a trainer and an elephant. It exposed the reality of circus animal handling and opened a larger conversation about cruelty, confinement, and the price of forcing wild animals into submission. Number 2. Islam Shaheen. The tent was full, the air thick with excitement, and every eye fixed on the center of the cage. What unfolded next was not the dazzling spectacle people had paid to see, but a moment of raw horror that no one present would ever forget. In Alexandria, Egypt, November 2016, trainer Islam Shaheen stepped into the ring with 3 lions. At 35, he was no stranger to the dangers. A decade of experience stood behind him, and yet on that night, it offered no protection. With 2 fellow handlers beside him, Shaheen raised a long stick and signaled one of the animals forward. But attention suddenly shifted. The 3rd lion, weighing close to 450 pounds, lunged without warning. The audience, who seconds earlier had been clapping to the music, froze in shock. The animal reared up, pinned Shaheen to the ground, and tore into his neck. What must have felt like endless seconds was captured on a shaky phone recording, showing handlers rushing in to drag the predator away, while Shaheen lay motionless beneath it. He was pulled from the cage and taken to Andalusian Salam Hospital, but the injuries were already devastating. Doctors reported fractures to his skull, cuts across his face and neck so deep they left no chance of recovery, broken bones through his chest, and internal bleeding. Despite every effort, he passed away a few days later. The lion that attacked him had only recently been added to the show, brought in from South Africa. Its sudden aggression sparked heated speculation. Some close to Shaheen believed hunger might have been the cause. Others argued the pounding music in the arena had startled it. The circus spokesman offered another explanation, saying the animal was in its mating season, a time when behavior often becomes erratic and unpredictable. For those who witnessed it, the spectacle of a trainer being brought down by the very creature he spent his life controlling was unbearable. The video spread quickly beyond Egypt, forcing people to confront the reality that beneath the stage lights and rehearsed performances, these were still wild predators. The tragedy raised questions that linger long after the music faded. Can any amount of training truly strip away an animal's instincts? Or does stepping into the ring always mean living on borrowed time? For Shaheen, the answer came in the most brutal way imaginable. Number 1. Ken Peters. It was supposed to be a polished show, one SeaWorld had rehearsed countless times, but what happened that night in San Diego was anything but routine.
Ken Peters was performing in a show at SeaWorld in San Diego when a killer whale suddenly turned on him.
The crowd had gathered under the bright lights of Shamu Stadium on November 29, 2006. Families, tourists, children, all waiting for the grand finale. Trainer Ken Peters, confident and experienced, was in the water with Kasatka, a female orca weighing over 5,000 pounds. The two had performed together for years. Their routine was predictable, familiar, safe, or at least it seemed that way. The trick was called the rocket hop. The whale would launch Peters upward, propelling him high into the air before he sliced back into the pool. But instead of following the pattern, Kasatka turned sharply. Her jaws closed around Peters's foot, and she dragged him under. At first, the crowd thought it was all part of the act, but seconds stretched, and silence replaced the cheers. This was not entertainment anymore. Below the surface, Peters was trapped. Kasatka dragged him deeper, holding him down before briefly letting him up for air. Again and again, she pulled him under. Each time he surfaced, he stroked her back, kept his voice calm, and tried to settle her the way trainers are taught. But the cycle continued. Nearly 9 minutes of terror unfolded before the audience, who sat frozen in disbelief, unsure whether they were witnessing choreography or a life-and-death struggle. Other trainers on the edge of the pool were frantic. They stretched out a net across the water, hoping to create a barrier that might protect him if he managed to get free. Eventually, Kasatka loosened her grip. Peters seized the moment, pushing away with what strength he had left. He swam desperately towards safety, his wetsuit torn, his leg mangled. When he finally pulled himself from the water, it was clear how close he had come. His foot was broken, and his body was marked by deep puncture wounds. He had survived, but barely. Why did this happen? That question has haunted marine parks and animal behavior experts ever since. Some pointed to Kasatka's calf, housed in another pool nearby. Recordings revealed the calf had been making sharp, insistent calls throughout the performance. Could those calls have triggered Kasatka's protective instincts? Others argued her behavior had little to do with that moment and everything to do with years of captivity. Orcas are built for the open ocean, for family groups, for endless miles of swimming. What happens when you confine one inside with concrete walls, isolate it from its pod, and demand nightly performances? Maybe this was the breaking point. The unsettling part is that this was not the first time Kasatka had turned on Peters. In fact, she had done so twice before, once in 1993 and again in 1999. Both incidents were alarming, but neither changed the way shows were run. Peters himself later insisted he never believed Kasatka intended to kill him, even when she dragged him under. He said he felt she would eventually let him go. He compared the risk to driving a car, where accidents are possible but accepted. Not everyone agreed with that perspective. To many, the attack was not chance, it was consequence. Kasatka lived for years after that incident. She was euthanized in 2017 after developing an untreatable form of pneumonia, reaching an age of around 40 to 42 years. By captive standards, that was long. But her life was marked by cycles of isolation, stress, and conflict that no audience could see from the stands. Enjoyed the video? Let us know with a like and subscribe for more content coming soon. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.